When Chris asked me what the title of this talk would be, I said it would be, "Who will tell the story of who we are?" Chris said, "Oh my God." And I recalled that when I was in law school, I was known for never giving the simple answer to a question. And when people would ask me a question, I would start with the context and the history, and my friends would say, "She's coming in for the answer, she's coming closer, no, she veers off again." So it is my want to give the big picture, because I don't believe we get it too often in the information we get about abortion unless we come to gatherings like this. I am quite serious about the title, and what it means is this. I had a philosophy professor at Catholic University who gave me a terrific piece of information. He said a movement will succeed if that movement resonates with the people as telling the people where they've been and where they're going. If it seems to resonate with the people in terms of their values, their hopes, and other fundamental truths about their lives. Now, you've often seen this phenomenon in political campaigns. When candidates run, they say to the people, "I'm in step with American values. I represent who we are and where we're going in the future, and my opponent doesn't. I represent the American family, our spirit of volunteerism," or whatever it may be. And that candidate who can successfully tell the story of where his or her people were and are and hope to be is probably the one that's going to win. So the question I have today is, are we in the pro-life movement going to be the ones telling the American people what their story is, what it is in this late period of the 20th century and will be into the future? Or is someone else going to resonate with them and take over the story? Well, I think it's first important to look at what our story is. I think, first of all, our story is that we tell people, you know what? Human beings are basically good and treat one another in a very humane fashion. That's really what it means to be a human being. Pro-lifers also say human beings are fundamentally respectful of other human beings, no matter their state in life, born or unborn, more or less dependent, more or less developed, more or less disabled, no matter what their race or sex is. That's the story that we reflect. We also tell the story that Americans are capable of sacrifice for long-term goals. They're capable of setting their sights on the good and doing what's necessary to get there. We also tell the story that we care for life of women. Now, that's an American story. It hasn't always been the case, but it's very much a part of the American story now. Where are women going? What is their value? And we pro-lifers say, you know, we value women. We value their ability to give life, what they bring in particular to society, all the gifts that they have, including their ability to be mothers and nurturers. And we value that so much that in our efforts, we don't direct ourselves solely to educating about the humanity of the unborn, but there are even more groups, more than pro-life activist groups in the country, are pro-life groups offering services to women so that they don't feel compelled to make the choice for abortion. And that's who we are. And now let's look and see what is the story that abortion advocates are telling people that we are as Americans. Because you have to notice that that's what they're saying to Americans. The story of choice is the final word, the critical word on who we are. They're telling Americans that human life doesn't have a given or objective value. Human life has the value that a mother or the society gives it. Human life is a commodity to be weighed against the value of other commodities. And in many cases, in fact, maybe in the majority of cases, freedom is the commodity that will win over life if the woman or the society thinks that's true. They're also saying that a woman's freedom and her unique gift and ability to bear children are antithetical to one another. And don't you fool yourself. They talk in the language of soft feminism, but that is the radical feminist message. That is the message that says being able to give birth is a liability, and abortion is the answer to curing that liability. And that is what they're trying to tell America is part of the American story. They're also saying that bad means are okay to get to good ends. You'll hear Kate Michelman of the National Abortion Rights Action League, NARAL, refer to abortion as a tragedy. It's a tragedy, she says, but we have to have it because it promotes women's freedom. I debated Frances Kisling, head of Catholics for a Free Choice, a very misnamed group up at Boston College, and she said, it's human, it's alive. I'll acknowledge all that, but we have to have the right to end that life, because if women don't have it, they're just not going to get where they have to be. Faye Waddleton, in a lecture at Washington University at St. Louis, preceding the lecture that I gave, said, sure it's human, sure it's alive, but if women don't have that power, then we're relinquishing all possibilities for power in society. It's a matter of power. Yeah, it's tragic, but the ends are good, so whatever means we use are okay. And they're saying that's the American story. They're also saying that American society, in particular American women, don't have the fortitude to undertake long-term, responsible, and sometimes sacrificing solutions. Hey, we need a quick fix. We can't fix the national debt. We can't fix our debates over what we're going to do about poverty and how are we going to solve assimilation with regard to minorities. What are we going to do with regard to the third world? And we've stopped trying to think in long term. And the way we think about abortion is just like that. It's short term, and we need that because women in particular and American society in general really aren't capable of doing anything more responsible than that right now. I ask you, which of these stories is the more American story? And I'm saying this not to be a cheerleader, but because I believe it. Our story is most unequivocally the American story. Now, why do I believe that it's the American story? Well, first of all, look at our history. Although we've made a tremendous number of errors on the way, our direction has been to enlarge and enlarge further and further those human beings that come in to the community that receives benefits in our society, into the community of care that is the American society. Whether that is blacks, whether that is immigrants from around the world, whether that is women. If you look at our history, again, stumbling along the way, making tremendous errors and still not there, but trying to say, we want to increase the boundaries of our community to include you. That's a very American story. It's the story of Ellis Island. That's our story. Also, if you look at jurisprudence and social policy in the United States, as a lawyer, and I reflect on the law on this, we know in American jurisprudence that we don't hold responsible or culpable for certain wrongs that are committed or for certain responsibilities that are due in society. We don't hold responsible those people who aren't able to fulfill responsibilities, like children. We don't hold children responsible for things that adults are responsible for. We know that in order to make some people equal, you have to give them more resources. So in order just to make the disabled able to participate equally in society, you've got to make that social policy decision to put in ramps, to have hearing devices, etc. That is very much the American story. Our civil rights laws, our laws with regard to the right to the disabled, our jurisprudence with regard to children versus adults. It permeates our jurisprudence. The unborn are persons who are absolutely powerless. It stands to reason in the tradition of our jurisprudence that we accord them more benefits to bring them into the society and to treat them at least equally with others. The polls. Now, in the face of the onslaught of pro-abortion information that comes from very powerful institutions, and that's been referred to a couple times this morning, once by Mr. Bavaro, by Bishop Daley, by the Cardinal. In face of the onslaught of information that would gear one to thinking that choice is the only answer, a pro-life majority has hung on. Now think of that. Think of what you read in your papers, what you see on TV. And yet, what do we have? We have, under a recent Gallup poll, 75% of Americans thinking that abortion does take a human life. We have, in a recent Worthland poll, 56% of Americans who would restrict all but 1% to 2% of abortions. They would retain only abortions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. If asked, what would they want to see the law look like? We know from Planned Parenthood's own statistics that rape, incest, and life of the mother together are somewhere around less than 1%, but accounting for underreporting, maybe we say 2% even, of all abortions. We have 56% of Americans who would want to restrict the other 98 to 99%. When you ask Americans, when does the right of an unborn outweigh the right of a woman to choose an abortion, 43% say at conception, another 13% at heartbeat, which is about 3 weeks. In other words, before abortions are even in large part beginning to take place in this country, 56% would say no. When you ask people, when does life begin, 49% will tell you at conception. This is across the board. This is not in the Catholic Church. This is across the board, something that they know from science as human beings. Another factor that tells me that this is the American story, our story, is the sheer longevity of the movement. 18 years and going strong. Because we know that you can't rise up the persons for whom we're fighting to take our place. This is one of those movements where that can't happen. That can happen in the movements for fair treatment for race and sex. One generation can replace another. But that can't happen here. If we don't do it, the persons for whom we're fighting are lost because they can't do it themselves. Interesting statistic, experience. The more life's experience that people have, the older they are, if they've had children, do you know that those people are more likely to be pro-life than anyone else? Life's experience tells people that pro-life is the true, the best message. And finally, in America, we don't stay with social policies that fail. We go on to the next one. And unequivocally, the questions, the problems that abortion was supposed to solve that the Supreme Court lined up in the Roe case, they haven't been solved by abortion. In fact, it's bred more abortions. Legal abortions have replaced and exceeded illegal abortions by 6 to 11 times since Roe v. Wade came down. Child abuse has increased. The number of women who were supposedly going to come out of poverty by having fewer children, instead 13% more have dipped into poverty since Roe v. Wade. And other problems have been created. People thought we were talking fright talk in the 70s when we said that the domino effect was a real thing, that disrespect for human life breeds disrespect for human life. And what have you seen? The baby doe cases, euthanasia, assisted suicide as a real possibility for a law in the Western United States. Violence increasing in a way that we could not have predicted. So not only has abortion not solved our problems, it's created additional ones. And Americans don't stay with a social policy that fails them that miserably. So in other words, the pro-life message is the real message that will resonate and tell people where we've been and where we're going. Avery Dulles, who you may know as a theologian locally here at Fordham University, asked the question in one of his books, how do you convert people to an idea that may even be antithetical to their way of believing? He says, well, first of all, you have them look around and say, would that, if other people adopted that idea, would that be good for me? Well, if everybody treated life respectfully from the womb to natural death, yes, it would be good for each one of us, because each of us would be treated respectfully by our neighbors. The person should ask themselves, if this idea were adopted, would it be good for the common good? Yes, if everybody respected one another, respected the sanctity and the dignity of each other's lives, that would be good for the common good. And the pro-life message tells people that. It's about all of us respecting one another from conception until natural death. Our message is one that should easily resonate with persons, because when they reflect on it, they'll see that it's wise for them and it's wise for the society. Well, how do you tell the story in the United States? Well, you go straight to the most powerful cultural institutions. And Mr. Bavaro referred to them. What are they, some of them? They are the entertainment industry. They are the communications media, every aspect of it. They are professional societies. They are the media in general. So that's what the bishops did. They were never so naive as to believe that Catholics were only getting their information from attending Mass and going to other religious functions. They knew that Catholics and others concerned about this issue were getting their information as well from the secular media and from other powerful cultural institutions. And I failed to mention the academy, high schools, colleges in particular. So we decided that we had to go where the story was being told and to do it right. And so we hired the best communications expertise we could find. Found out what Americans were believing about abortion, some of the statistics that I've shared with you today, and then went there and told our story. The first place we went is to individual communities, doing things like we're doing here today, going direct with the message, telling the truth about abortion, informing them about the numbers that are performed, the repeat abortions, the after effects, what Roe v. Wade merely made legal. We found people were woefully ignorant of these sort of pieces of information. You have some people thinking Roe v. Wade made abortion illegal in the United States. You had 14% thinking it made abortion legal in rape, incest, and life of the mother. And then the great majority thought it made abortion legal for the first 3 months. We have to educate people about this. And one of the ways is directly. So we come to you today. So with the assistance of communications expertise helping us do it even better, we put together educational brochures. We put together ads and we put them in places where you'll see them and where the conflicted middle will see them. We put together messages that are geared to touching people where they live. To the conflicted middle, whose most important value may be freedom, we draft messages in the context of freedom, and we put them where that conflicted middle will see them. To many of you who are most motivated by the notions of what Jesus did for the defenseless, or by care for other human beings, we draft messages in those terms so that you'll understand and get in touch again with the inspiration for why you're here. So those are some of the direct things we're doing. Indirectly, we go to professional societies and we speak to them. I gave a lecture to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in New Orleans last week. I had a woman come up to me, 15-year practitioner, OBGYN. She said, I have to take serious exception with your saying that Roe made abortion legal for 9 months. You know it was only the first 3 months. And I thought, oh my God, here is a highly educated woman. I explained it to her. I had the case with me. I explained how by its definition of health as including a woman's well-being, the exception for health swallowed the rule, and abortion can take place for 9 months. We go to the academy. I have said no to no college that has invited me to speak. I get picketed. I get people yelling at me until they're crying. But the message is there in the academy where powerful messages are formed and then drift down to the general public over the years. We especially go to the media. We speak to them directly with press conferences, with meetings, with press releases, press breakfasts. We have a newsletter that's just for the media called the Abortion Monitor that collects stories from journals of limited circulation, professional journals and others, about what's happening in abortion practice in the United States. Not the politics, which they can see in the paper, not what activists are doing, which they can see in the paper, but what we may call in German das Sein, the thing in itself, abortion practice, how it's affecting Americans, how it's affecting families, society. And that's just for the media. And that's a way of getting indirectly to the rest of society because how the media covers it is critical. I see signs of hope everywhere. I see them in the essays I hear today. I see them in the resumes that come pouring across my desk from young people wanting to have jobs with us. I travel around the country. I see people doing anything they know how to get the attention of legislators. In Mississippi, they told me they sent cookies to their legislators with a little ribbon that said Mississippi Pro-Life Task Force because they didn't know how to lobby and they thought this was a good start. I see these tremendous signs of hope. Pro-life people have been so good to me everywhere I go. I cannot help but believe that their story of kindness, which is the American story, will in time be all our story. Don't be discouraged. When I debated at Boston College, there were people desperately committed to Catholics for a free choice there. Even though Francis Kisling's message was, and I'm almost quoting, yes, it's life, yes, it's human, but a woman has to be able to weigh these things, and her values have to be able to take precedence. Everything's up for grabs. We can use bad means to get to good ends. And I walked out of there thinking, how can such an illogical message carry even her supporters in the audience? And I went home in tears because I hadn't converted every one of them. And I spoke to my father about it later, and he said, Helen, you think you can overcome the entire malaise of the late 20th century in one night? Because that's the message of the late 20th century. She is the paradigm of that message. I'm not God yet, my father said. But someday we're going to be able to look back at this time and we're going to wonder how such an aberration of 4,400 abortions a day ever came to take place. And we're going to be thankful to God and to one another that our story was finally able to resonate with people. They recognized it for what it was and they adopted the pro-life message. Thank you very much.